Fate Be Changed, Chapter 38, Elinor. Elinor sat in silence, feeling smothered by the tension that continued to permeate the air following the exchange between the king and the queen. She was counting down the seconds to when the chieftain of Clan Fraser and his family would make their departure. Now that the dessert had been served, it wouldn't be very long. The sooner they left, the sooner she would be able to do so. She had to get to her chamber, and then she had to go. She had no choice. An anguished cry caught in Elinor's throat. The decision was even more difficult than it had been just a fortnight earlier. She had thought there was nothing more important than her freedom, but knowing that her kingdom was under threat made her choice that much harder. Unbidden, the image of that child from the village popped into her mind. What would become of him and the others on McCameron land living in dire straits? She was going off in search of others to help when there were many in her kingdom who were in need. Why? Why was she doing this? She glanced at Lachlan and immediately had her answer. But then she thought about Fergus and how she would be leaving him also. Elinor could not fathom a time in which a Dunbrock was a reason to make her want to give up her much sought-after freedom and remain in her kingdom. Yet if she were promised to Fergus instead of Lachlan, Elinor was not sure she would be considering this new life in the lowlands. No, she knew she would not be, because she and Fergus would work together to save this kingdom, and when they would rule it in a way that would put the people of McCameron Kingdom above all else. Together. "It is time for us to take our leave," the Fraser chieftain said. He looked to King Douglas. "Ye shall give thought to what we discussed?" "I shall," her father answered. Both men avoided looking at Queen Katerina. But Elinor did not need to see her mother's face to know that she was incensed. She could feel fury emanating from her. The fact that the king and the queen had allowed the Frasers to witness their argument still shocked her. Her mother, for one, was always conscious of what outsiders thought about the royal family. But not tonight. Tonight she raged without any consideration of their dinner guests, or what they might share with others. Elinor was certain the argument would continue once their guests departed, but she could not afford to stay in the great hall to hear it. Time was of the essence. The moment the chieftain and his family left, Elinor excused herself and ran up to her bedchamber. She began pulling kirtles and her earsade from her wardrobe. She threw 3 tunics into a pile, along with a pair of hose and a skirt. She could not pack too much. Not only did she not have time, she did not want anything weighing her down. She held in the sob that tried to escape at the thought of never seeing her home again. This was likely the last time she would see Merida as well, and Fergus. It felt as if a hand squeezed around her heart. She would have loved to see him compete against the other clansmen. This was not the time for tears. She had to leave that night before her father married her off to Lachlan Fraser. She lifted the tapestry that she'd been working on for months from the wooden frame and held it out and rolled it up. But when she walked to the bed, she could not stuff it with the rest of her things. The tapestry was not hers to take. It belonged to the castle. It would hang with the others that told her family's story, the rich history of the McCamerons. Maybe her mother would finish it or assign the task to one of the maids. It is not a maid's duty. It is mine. Elinor swallowed past the lump that had stalled in her throat. She'd known this time would come. From the moment she had made the decision to run away, she knew there would be things she needed to leave behind, bits and pieces of her life that would be difficult to part with, but that had to be left all the same, like her family. She sat on the edge of the bed and buried her face in the tapestry, unable to stop the tears from falling. She had spent hours and hours imagining the amazing adventure that awaited her and the freedom it would bring, but she had never allowed herself to dwell on everything she would have to leave behind. Now that the time was here, it was all she could think about. And Fergus, of course. These days, thoughts of him were never far from her mind. He was proud, but in a way that had grown charming, and his teasing, while infuriating, had made her smile more in the few days since she had known him than she had in ages. Could she truly see herself married to Fergus Dunbrock? Yes. She could see it all too well. It looked like years of laughter and delighting in the joys of this beautiful kingdom together. Maybe she could talk to her father, negotiate with him. Maybe she could convince him that they should unite with one of the other clans, like Clan Dunbrock. Then maybe she would not have to leave. Stop such foolishness, Elinor whispered. Of all the clans in McCameron Kingdom, Clan Dunbrock was likely the last one her father would choose to form such a close alliance with. It was not as if it mattered to him that she could not abide the man that she had been promised to. What she wanted played no part in the decision. It was tradition. Why would this stupid, unfair tradition of promising children to others, at birth no less, even exist? And why did it have to be to Lachlan Fraser? She could sit here and continue to bandy about these questions that would never have a satisfactory answer, or she could leave. Those were her two choices. If she remained by this time on Sunday, she could very well be Lachlan's wife. That cannot happen, Elinor said. She stood and gathered the garments she meant to take with her, wrapping them up in the counterpane from her bed and securing them with 2 belts. She took one last look around her bedchamber, squelching the mournful cry that nearly escaped. She did not have time to mourn right now. She would do so later, after she had put some distance between herself and the castle. With one last look, Elinor turned for the door and screamed.